I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network, and this is a breaking news alert. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. just denied Rudy Giuliani's motion to dismiss the defamation claims, intentional infliction of emotional distress claims, and civil conspiracy claims brought by Ruby Freeman and Shay, the Georgia election officials who were the victims of a heinous and horrific defamatory campaign by Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump, and other MAGA extremists in Trump's inner circle who lied that Freeman and Moss were criminals who engaged in a ballot stuffing scheme where they hid secret ballots and injected 18,000 ballots or something like that for Biden and told the Republican election watchers to leave the room. All of this was proven to be completely false, that Rudy Giuliani used intentionally edited and manipulated video to show things taking place that was not taking place at all. The Georgia election officials, Republicans, mind you, all said that these accusations by Rudy Giuliani was false. Trump's Department of Justice said these accusations were false. This was a proven defamatory scheme by Giuliani and Trump, yet they continued to push the big lie, even as Freeman and Moss were the subject of threats of violence and harassment. You will recall that Freeman and Ross courageously spoke before the January 6th committee about their ordeal, about what they experienced based on these lies propagated by Rudy Giuliani. And back on December 23rd of 2021, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss brought this lawsuit against Rudy Giuliani as well as OAN. They actually settled their lawsuit against OAN for an undisclosed monetary amount. That left Rudy Giuliani as the only defendant left in the case. Rudy Giuliani filed a motion to dismiss. In his motion to dismiss the claims by Freeman and Moss, Giuliani argued that his statements shouldn't be believed as fact, that they were just merely his opinion. He claimed that Freeman and Moss blew the statute of limitations, and he also argued that no reasonable person would have believed he was talking about Freeman and Moss, despite him talking about Freeman and Moss. Well, the Judge Beryl Howell, who happens to be the chief judge, more on this in a moment, of the Washington, D.C. federal courthouse, summarily rejected all of Rudy Giuliani's claims. Judge Beryl Howell found that Freeman and Moss have asserted enough facts to establish valid claims regarding defamation, regarding the intentional infliction of emotional distress claims, and regarding the civil conspiracy. And the court even said there is enough facts pled that establishes a civil conspiracy with Donald Trump and with the Trump campaign to intentionally defame Freeman and Moss with actual malice. And whether we have to apply the public vigor standard of actual malice or the standard for a private individual who is the victim of defamatory statements, Judge Beryl Howell says it doesn't matter. There is enough facts in this complaint to prove actual malice, which is the higher standard that Rudy Giuliani engaged in. So what happens next? We now move to the discovery phase where Freeman and Moss will get to take Giuliani's deposition. They'll get to make document requests at Giuliani, probably Trump and others in that Trump MAGA inner circle, and then the case will go to trial. Now, what is very important and very interesting is the judge who made this ruling, Judge Beryl Howell. Not only is she the chief judge of the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., but in that role as the chief judge of the Washington, D.C. federal courthouse, she oversees all of the criminal grand juries that take place in the D.C. federal courthouse. Now, this includes the criminal grand jury impaneled by the Department of Justice that is investigating the criminal conduct of Donald Trump for Espionage Act violations, obstruction and concealment of mutilation of thousands of government records, which that grand jury is the one that issued the subpoena for Mar-a-Lago that Donald Trump's lawyer, Christina Bobb, ultimately sent back a false declaration in June of 2022, stating that all of the records were returned when all of the records were not returned. So there's a secret criminal grand jury there, and then there's a secret criminal grand jury that is currently impaneled investigating crimes relating to the January 6th insurrection and Trump's conduct related to the January 6th insurrection and others who are in Trump's inner circle. And Judge Beryl Howell oversees that. So when there are disputes before those secret grand juries, the disputes go to Judge Beryl Howell. But we haven't got to see any of her specific rulings yet. We've learned about some of her rulings through sources, but we haven't actually seen what Judge Beryl Howell believes relating to the insurrection. So this ruling right here related to Freeman and Moss gives us some great insight into how Judge Beryl Howell thinks about the January 6th insurrection, as well as the complicity of Donald Trump in it, and what she views to be this horrific and despicable conduct. And in no uncertain terms, she lays this out in this Giuliani order. But what we also learned, for example, about Judge Beryl Howell, unrelated to this Giuliani order, is that she's already rejected Donald Trump's claim in the secret grand jury proceedings of executive privilege, where Trump has tried to get top administration officials who were top administration officials when he was the president to not testify under executive privilege. And so, for example, he tried to get former Vice President Pence's former chief of staff, Mark Short, to not testify about certain issues under executive privilege, as well as Greg Jacobs, the former general counsel to former Vice President Pence. And that was rejected. Judge Beryl Howell found executive privilege does not apply there. So the fact that we have those rulings, and now we have this insight from her denial of Rudy Giuliani's motion to dismiss, we know that this judge who's overseeing those criminal cases has a very dim view, to put it lightly, about Donald Trump. She views what Trump did as one of the most disgraceful things to our democracy. So this is actually not just good news that Rudy Giuliani's case was not dismissed and that his motion to dismiss was denied, but it's also great news to know how Judge Beryl Howell is thinking, because she's overseeing the criminal proceedings before these secret grand juries, these secret criminal grand juries. Let me just read for you, though, the opening statement of the order denying Rudy Giuliani's motion to dismiss. This is what it says. After the polls closed across the country on November 3rd, 2020, the first presidential election in U.S. history to be conducted in the midst of a deadly global pandemic, the results in some states were immediately called, with either former Vice President Biden or then President Trump declared the obvious winner. In other states, including Georgia, the margins of victory were substantially closer, and voters and candidates went to bed that night not knowing who had won. As days passed, local and state election officials diligently conducted the counting of absentee ballots and manual recounts, but the void of clear results became filled with increasingly outlandish paranoia from those claiming the election was being, quote, stolen. Defendant Rudolph Giuliani, a current media personality and former politician once dubbed America's mayor, propagated and pushed that false narrative. Caught in the crossfire of Giuliani's campaign to undermine the legitimacy of the 2020 election were plaintiffs Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, collectively plaintiffs. Freeman was a temporary election worker with the Fulton County Registration and Elections Department in Fulton County, Georgia during the 2020 general elections, while Moss worked on Fulton County's absentee ballot operation. After Giuliani made a litany of statements and accusations against plaintiffs concerning their activities as election workers, Freeman and Moss initiated the instant lawsuit in December 2021 against Giuliani and others for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and civil conspiracy. Giuliani now moves under the federal rules to dismiss the 3 counts for the reasons set forth below. Giuliani's motion to dismiss is denied. Judge Beryl Howell goes over the facts that are alleged in the complaint, finds it to be sufficiently pled to show Giuliani acted with actual malice, and then found sufficient evidence that Giuliani was engaged in a civil conspiracy with the Trump campaign as well. So it will be interesting to see if this case is now amended to add Donald Trump, that this finding has been made. And this is what it says, page 24 of the order. The strategic plan by Giuliani and other conduct provide ample circumstantial evidence of a civil conspiracy between Giuliani and members of the Trump campaign. The stated goal of the plan was to engage in a nationwide communication outreach campaign to try to manipulate the public about the fraud that was committed. And they use the language of what the campaign was, but ultimately the claim was that all of that was false, and that is what is the defamatory here. Conclusion. For the reasons set forth above, Giuliani's motion to dismiss is denied, and the entirety of plaintiffs' claims may advance to discovery. A very strong ruling, and it is important to again note the significance of the judge who made the ruling, Judge Beryl Howell. You now know what happened in Giuliani and how that relates to those criminal grand juries that are taking place in Washington, D.C. We'll keep you updated with more information here at the MeidasTouch Network. The wheels of justice turn in the right direction. Hey, hit the subscribe button now. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers thanks to your support. And you can also support the work we do at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. There's a number of memberships you could join there. Join one that you like if you can. It helps grow this independent media channel. We have no outside investors at all, so your generosity there is so appreciated. No worries if you can't, but if you can, that is a big way you can help. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network.
MeidasTouch is unapologetically pro-democracy, and look, we know you are too. So please make sure you check out our best-selling shirt and our best-selling gear, the unapologetically pro-democracy gear. And hey, while you're at it, make sure you check out my favorite shirt and one of our most famous designs, It Wasn't Rigged, You're Just a Loser, at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.